Hello, everyone, and welcome to your Daily Detroit for Monday, January 9th, 2023. By popular demand, when this news broke about the retirement of Senator Debbie Stabenow, my Instagram, my Facebook, my personal text messages started lighting up within, I would say, 30 minutes. Where's Steve?
That's so nice.
Right? So, of course, I had to send the pod bat signal to Mr. Steve Friess, writer of Newsweek, Our Detroit, so many other things, and longtime friend of the show. Steve, so good to talk to you.
It always is. Thank you for having me again.
Oh, I mean, I wouldn't have it any other way. Debbie Stabenow, for those who don't know, has been in office in the U.S. Senate for the state of Michigan since 2001. We have listeners who I know were actually born around that time. She has devoted her life to public service in a lot of ways. I think her first elected office, I went and did some digging, was at the age of 24. So this is somebody who has been really putting their shoulder to the wheel for things in Michigan for a long time, Steve.
She's a legend, and she would be the first woman to win statewide office as a senator. And she went off to Washington alongside Carl Levin, and they worked on a whole lot of environmental and water safety issues. And she's just sort of always been an interesting middle-of-the-road figure, a very genuine Michigan personality in that way. And I mean, given that most Michigan people don't even remember who the other senator is. Poor Gary Peters is going to be the senior senator of the state, and he's still not very well known. I guess he's done some interesting things over the last couple of years since the Democrats have had the majority, but Debbie Stabenow, she's the gold standard for the state of Michigan.
For sure. Just her general style is more visible and such. One thing that strikes me about her and Peters is the kind of elected official that wins statewide. Neither of them are per se firebrands, but they do have conviction. And Debbie specifically has, a lot of things that she does believe in and pushes for. I rarely hear people go, oh, that socialist Debbie Stabenow, blah, 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 right? A good amount of people on both sides of the aisle kind of even if they didn't vote for her, they respect her.
What she is doing right now, choosing not to run for re-election at the age that she is, 70, 71, something like that, is an incredibly reasonable thing to do. And strangely unusual for senators. They don't usually just step aside when they're still healthy and have an easy path to return to office. They don't do that very often. But she decided that there's this sort of new generation of leaders coming up. It's been a common refrain among Democrats and Republicans, actually, that there's this gerontocracy that is keeping a vice grip on the upper echelons of American power, from the president of the United States to the leadership in the Senate. And finally, in the House, there's been a break in the logjam because Nancy Pelosi has stepped aside, and there's this young, very interesting group of Democrats over on that side of the Congress. The fact that she has made this decision, she didn't have to. I mean, I don't know. Maybe there's something we don't know. Maybe she isn't as well as she seems, but she seems like a pretty healthy and reasonable person who just decided that doing this into her 80s is not good for her or the country.
As you said, the word reasonable is correct. Heck, even when it comes to Nancy Pelosi, I think that those are both reasonable decisions. And one of the reasons why is that there's actually a bunch of people who are all rather interesting, all worth talking about. And when it comes to Senator Debbie Stabenow, there are so many names that you look at them and you're like, yeah, you know what? This is plausible and should make for a very interesting next couple of years.
The name that came immediately to my mind, and obviously a lot of folks, is Alyssa Slotkin, because I remember talking to her when she was running for the first time she ran for Congress. She was running essentially as a Debbie Stabenow acolyte. I mean, she was talking about herself in the same vein because she was running for the seat that was once held in Congress by the senator. From that point on, it is necessary, if you're going to have appeal statewide, to prove that you have actually been able to draw votes from Republicans and independents in the state. I don't know that there's a Democrat quite as qualified who would want this job as Slotkin is, but we'll see.
Yeah, I mean, looking at the field in general, I think that this is a situation where whoever gets elected, you would continue to see a moderate.
Yeah.
Right? Like, I don't think the seat's going to swing far left in any way, shape, or form.
No, I mean, that's not the state. The state is relatively moderate. For what it's worth, Gretchen Whitmer is essentially a centrist Democrat as they are defined today. Like, for example, there's been discussion, this would be a great opportunity for somebody like Dana Nessel. I don't think so. I don't think that Dana Nessel is a person, the Attorney General of the state, who would get elected to anything else, at least not statewide. I mean, maybe she could certainly run for Congress in some part of the state where she could win if that was the thing she wanted to do. But she is where she is. She got lucky in a lot of ways by the craziness.
Because I can't imagine if the Republicans put up a more mainstream candidate. I think she ran against Stabenow. Like, I think she would have had a closer race.
Yeah.
I think that was a situation of the candidate she was facing wasn't as good as the challenge that was there. You were mentioning Slotkin. I think she's an interesting name because she brings so much gravitas. And I didn't see it as much online among like the Twitterati or whatever, but I find in general that leans a little farther left than the general population, or right, depending on who, what group you're talking about. But when it comes to Slotkin, whether it's her background in intelligence or background with Barack Obama administration, she has the gravitas. And I think about that, and I think back to Carl Levin and the importance of having somebody who knows what they're doing with that stuff.
The way you put it just now and the way I was thinking about it, Alyssa Slotkin is essentially the political love child of Debbie Stabenow and Carl Levin. Exactly. She has the ability to persuade moderate women voters. She has a history of public service and national security credentials that was the calling card of Carl Levin. She's talked often about Levin as a role model as well. And, I don't know, she seems like just the right kind of figure to run and probably win. Obviously, there are other Democrats, and the question will be whether she can make it through a crowded Democratic field, or whether somebody might be able to, like maybe Governor Whitmer, might be able to sort of put their thumb on the scale and clear it out so that it's not a messy process.
Her colleague Haley Stevens has also been mentioned. I don't see it as much.
No, she's not a very good candidate. I mean, granted, I think she's a better candidate than I gave her credit for because she did a pretty good job of winning this election and the others before her. But you talk about gravitas, she doesn't have it. You don't talk to Haley Stevens and think, wow, I'm in the presence of somebody who really knows a lot about a lot. When you talk to Alyssa Slotkin, you know that she's drawing on a ton of experience. And, she goes on the Sunday shows or on cable to talk about national security. She's a competent, highly intelligent woman who doesn't even need notes to express her opinions. And Haley Stevens is a very scripted, very tightly put together politician, and she can unravel very easily.
But I will say that I feel like she is a very good glove fit for her district because she did very well in both.
You said gloves, and all I can think of with her is that crazy time that she was on the floor of the House getting around some pink gloves or something.
I didn't think of that at all. I was just thinking about looking at the record and talking to people, how well she fits her district. And I don't mean that to be like a negative thing. It's rare that you see a person in their district kind of match up, like their policies, their thought processes. I know that some listeners were frustrated by the shellacking that, speaking of Levins, that Andy Levin got in that district, but I knew it was going to come all along because if you think about the politics of where she serves, who she is, where that all triangulates, I feel like that's a really safe place for her for a while.
I'll give Haley Stevens it's a similar kind of compliment to Alyssa Slotkin, which is they have both won very, very tough races. Haley Stevens is now in a safer space. Imagine that she'd probably be better off staying where she is. But both of them have threaded the needle and have not had easy races. And in a way, I think that, Alyssa Slotkin might find running for Senate easier than running for another term in her district Yeah, I don't know. I mean, I just think that she has the district. It is a little more friendly to her than it was before, but still, it's a challenge. And I think maybe she might prefer to be a senator and have every 6 years. And I don't know. I mean, senators are very hard to defeat once they're in office.
Yeah, and it seems like a match for the kinds of spaces she likes to play in. Like you were talking about those appearances and things like that. Those are the spaces
Yeah,
she likes to play in. And you know what? The press, we call senators for that kind of stuff. I mean, no offense to the House, but you look to
right, right,
senators,
right.
the whole historic cooling saucer of the tempers and all the things. You go back to the founding documents and whatever. What about Secretary of State Jocelyn Benson?
When I did my piece on Jocelyn Benson for my profile on her, it struck me that she didn't necessarily have huge political ambitions. That her ambition was to be a Secretary of State, something that she had studied and she had written about and she knew for a long time. And in addition to that, she has a very close friendship with Stephen Ross, the billionaire, who I believe is employer of her husband. I have a sense that Jocelyn Benson will be ready to do something else, that she's managed to sort of save democracy for Michigan, as I think she believes she has done. She got herself a nice presidential medal the other day. I just don't know that she has a range of policy interests that would make being a senator worth it for her or interesting to her. I just don't know that she wants to stay in this kind of a firing line when she could get a cushy job or get some foundation money to start some sort of a think tank on voting rights or something like that. I'm just making it up, I guess. That was my impression from her. My impression from her was that she wasn't Secretary of State because she cared about how the DMV ran. She is Secretary of State because she wanted to protect voting rights and she wanted to prevent the kinds of mayhem that went on in 2020 and now 2024. And so when she's done with that, I think she might be done.
She's somebody who strikes me who would do very well in the corporate sector, like extremely well
Right.
there. Her husband was at one point the chief development officer for the city of Detroit. And I believe she's a city resident as well. So I think about it and go, of course, being from Detroit, I kind of have a bias towards that. I hear everything that you're saying and I look at her background and go, yeah, I understand why people, and you don't know, right? This is so early in things. So some of this is kind of like looking at the field just as we're beginning. But I feel like she could make a huge difference in the corporate community. And that's a place that actually can create a lot of influence and does write a lot of checks and make a lot of things happen,
The other thing to think about is I don't think she thinks that her work is done until we have a smooth 2024 presidential election. And I don't think that she can do that and be Secretary of State. I don't think she can run for Senate and be a credible Secretary of State, protecting the state and enforcing the laws and making sure the election runs smoothly. I think that's her goal. Her goal is to get through 2024 and make sure that everything goes okay. That's why she ran for re-election. Specifically, she ran for re-election so that crazy town over there doesn't come in and muck everything up. She may have other interests that she thinks she can accomplish as a senator, but I just don't see it. I don't know. I mean, I think maybe it would be more likely. I mean, if she really had more ambition, maybe her ambition would be to be governor. I could see that. She's interested in state government. That's what she's been interested in her whole life.
I'm interested in that one too. That one actually kind of plays out in my head. I hadn't thought about it. I think for now, she really does want to keep her hands on the wheel of the car that is democracy and make sure it doesn't go off the road, Like she seems to be very focused on that. There's other names out there too, some younger names. Those like Senator Mallory McMurrow, who has become basically a national starlet with her speech and with fundraising and things like that. What do you think about someone like her, or do you think she's more in that governor mix?
I don't know. I have never interviewed her. I've seen her on TV a few times. I think she probably wants to be a congresswoman or something like that. I think it would be probably a bit of a leap from where she is now in the state government to Senate. I could be wrong, but my impression is that Stabenow was a congressman before she became a senator. I don't know. I think that Carl Levin was also a congressman before he became a senator. I don't remember anymore what his deal was. But I think that there's a sense that you do pay some dues. Gary Peters was a congressman before he was a senator. We're specifically talking about Michigan. And I mean, I don't know how it works out in other states, but it seems like here, to get your sort of credential, your credibility to be a senator, you put in some time in the lower house first.
Yeah, she has a magnetism. I mean, she's been on the podcast a couple of times. She definitely has a
Mm-hmm.
magnetism, and that kind of showed in that viral moment. That's kind of who she is, but that just kind of came out that way. She's an interesting figure. She's very interested in specific policies. Like, I can ask her about policy, and she'll know exactly what, like, she's keyed in. So I've
Mm-hmm.
got to hand that to her. But I think you're right. And I wonder if this is a someday maybe kind of situation as opposed to right now.
Sure, when Gary Peters is 140 years old and decides to hang it up, I mean, maybe he will give up in a term or two. But there are other things she can do. She can run for a statewide office, a governor or a lieutenant governor or something else like that. She bursts into the public awareness rather suddenly and obviously with a great deal of fanfare. I think that maybe it would be a better idea for her to spend a little time in her current job.
What about someone like a Garland Gilchrist? Again, a Detroiter, so I figure that I may as well bring it up. Although there is one Detroiter that everyone knows that said that he's not going to go for the office. But let's talk about Gilchrist really quick. Lieutenant Governor, although it raises your profile, I don't feel like he's everywhere. You know what I mean? Like, I worry that he doesn't have the name ID to pull this off statewide.
Well, I mean, look, he could. I bet he could.
Okay.
If Garland Gilchrist wanted to be a senator, and the Democratic Party wanted to sort of smooth the road out for him, as they did for Gary Peters at one time, he'd probably win. I think that the wind is at the back of Democrats in general for this kind of a job, and anything statewide. And, he's a very smart guy.
Mm-hmm.
He's a very interesting, smart guy. He has his own portfolio of interests. He's really interested in cybersecurity and anything related to the internet and technology. He hasn't won an election on his own. He's only won 2 elections as a running mate. Nobody really votes for the lieutenant governor when they're voting for governor. He hasn't really been tested that way. He might not want to find out, but I don't know if he will.
Well, and I don't know if he wants to, right? Like, I think that's kind of the thing.
Right.
He's somebody who did a lot of work improving technology at the city of Detroit. He likes to get his hands into stuff. And I don't know if Senate's necessarily the right role for that. Like, is he somebody you look at in more of an administrative role? As somebody who, I don't know, runs for mayor one day or something. I don't know. But like that kind of thing.
Yeah. Or governor. I mean,
right. Oh, yeah, governor or something like that. Yeah.
I mean, if he wants to be a governor, you would think that he would have dibs on that nomination in 4 years. Having served 8 years as lieutenant governor. Usually that's how it works in party politics. Maybe it would, maybe it wouldn't, but you would think that he would probably have a very strong position to bounce from. That's the reason why I kind of was dismissive of Mike Duggan wanting to be a senator. I just didn't see it. His skill set is executive. He's never been a person who has run anything by committee, or he's the boss. He's the boss of the city. He's the boss at DMC, the prosecutor's office. If he wanted something else, he could be governor. I don't know.
I mean, I hear plenty of rumblings that he's arming up for governor.
Yeah, I can see that.
And him clearly stating that he's not going for senator, beyond the things that I've heard of the fundraising and putting feelers out there, he's around like Coleman Young level of time here. He might be looking for another challenge. And I don't know for sure, but my spidey sense with this one, and this is my bold prediction, it'll be difficult for anyone else to go for that governor slot because somebody like Mike, who is basically a McNamara party boss. I mean, let's just be real. That's where he came from. That's who he is. Like, people today don't remember those days, but party bosses work a certain way. And he is, as you said, the boss, and in a lot of ways, a party boss. I feel like he's going to want his shot if he thinks he can do it.
Yeah, I mean, but he'll be 68 by the time that election comes around. The upside of governors is that, they can only serve 2 terms and, all the rest of that. So maybe it's of interest to him. We'll see. There is a history, like in Chicago, of becoming mayor for life and enjoying that. Very powerful and, in this case, very accomplished role. He gets to be the guy that healed Detroit, that turned Detroit back into something that people want to come to. That's a pretty big deal.
It is. But I also think that when you have somebody like that, you start to lose talent who go, okay, when is it going to be my shot? Right. Because then it's like, all right, where do you go, counsel? Where do you go, whatever? It kind of like stops up the system, if you will, when you're in there for 16, 20, whatever, years. That's a
Yeah.
criticism I have heard. I don't know if I share it, but that is a criticism that I have heard.
Yeah, but he doesn't care.
No.
I mean, that's true. Yeah, I mean, yes, and you're right. There are a number of young people who have wanted to run for mayor who have moved on to find other ways to contribute.
Yeah, I mean, and that is a political truth that I think some people don't like.
And we didn't talk about Pete Buttigieg either. I guess he has said he's not interested either, which is, again, he's certainly credible. Certainly got a credible stake, but he's a Michigander for about 5 minutes. So,
well, what about Pete Buttigieg? Let's say this statement that he made, because politicians, they do this, right? Like this is just the reality of things. Made this statement, not being part of it, but could he win if he ran? Let's do an if so here. Like if that statement didn't happen, so could he win?
Depends on who he's running against. Could he win against Gilchrist or against Sotkin? He's probably better known statewide and nationally. Yeah, I mean, he could win. I don't know what he would do. Would he attack them? Would he just kind of go off of his own record? And he'd spent so much time sort of proving that he's even a Michigander.
True.
That would be the first thing he would have to do. I mean, even though he sort of lives here, nobody really thinks of him that way. He's either from Indiana or sort of Washington, one or the other. I think he could certainly win. He's a uniquely skilled politician. That's how you go from being the mayor of South Bend to being a serious presidential candidate in one step. You have to be pretty good at politics, at selling yourself. And every time he goes on Fox News and brings the anchors down from their high horses, everybody wants more of him. But we'll see. I mean, I think he's thinking more along the lines of another presidential one. And I don't know that being a senator helps very much.
I would agree with you there. We really were remiss in not mentioning the Republicans. I feel like one name for sure might be in there. I don't know, but John James, we have to talk about him.
Yeah, I guess we do. Would he want to give up his long thought congressional seat after one term to run for Senate again? I don't know. Let's put it this way. We can look at whether it's a good idea politically and we can look at it at whether the person himself would want it. He probably would want it. It would be a lousy decision. He should stick where he is, unless he thinks he's going to lose, unless he thinks that the next time around his congressional race is going to be really hard. I don't know. He seems to want to do a lot of things. If I were him and I wanted to bounce up to higher office, I would stay in the Congress until governor race opens up in the state. That's what I would do. He could be a credible gubernatorial candidate, especially if he got, 2 or 3 terms in the Congress behind him.
What about somebody like a Peter Meyer?
I think he'd be an interesting candidate. I don't know if the Republicans would nominate him. I don't know if he could win a Republican statewide primary. I don't know who can win a statewide primary. Look who they ended up with last time. They ended up with Tudor Dixon. I don't know who can win and be a credible statewide candidate.
Well, reading some of the press reports of what's happening with the GOP convention and all the other stuff, they have these postmortems, whatever, and blaming that there's not enough money in. And I'm just being completely brutally honest here. I think they don't have an idea or they don't want to admit why they lost. And they lost because their policies, like a more moderate, like a Peter Meyer, could win, like in a general election. It goes back to that conundrum you and I have talked about for multiple episodes now. A winning Republican candidate can't come out of a Republican primary, a winning general candidate. And I think they're completely blind for whatever reason. Nobody wants to admit politically, probably because of the base or whatever. And I don't know if that's going to change anytime soon. I wonder if this is going to be something where the Democrats have a built-in advantage, at least for another 2 or 4 more years, because the Republicans don't know what cards are actually in their hand, or they don't want to accept them.
Is Peter Meyer a moderate, or is he simply not insane?
He's somebody who is agreeable in that you can actually have a discussion with him. But like politically, I don't know if he's a moderate or not. I don't really think he is. But he lives in the land of the here and now. and has a more conservative view toward it, as opposed to living in a land that is not based in what actually happened.
You know this one better than I do, but who do you think will be running the Republican Party in Michigan over the next couple of years? Is it Stabenow? Is it one of these people who just got shellacked in the election?
Right. Or, I mean, you've also got the Maddock crew, Michonne and Matt out of Macomb County.
I guess I'm just wondering because if there aren't any, grown-ups in that party who can encourage more moderate or at least rational. I mean, is it too much to ask the Republican Party nominate somebody for statewide office who at least fundamentally believes in elections, believes that they run competently, spend their time trying to convince the public that the election system is rigged or fraud? Just having somebody like that, and that would be a Peter Meyer, would be refreshing. I don't think they would win, but it would be nice.
It would make for a much better conversation because we could actually be talking about variances on policy as opposed to the ground rules.
Right. I don't think we're out of that woods yet. I think we're going to have to wait another couple of cycles to be able to say, okay, we've moved on from this crazy era that we're in. But maybe not. Who knows?
That's a hard thing to say and want to admit to myself, but as long as Donald Trump is on this earth, it's going to be this way.
Well, but not just him. DeSantis isn't that much better in that way.
No,
I think that it'll be a while. But in the meantime, it should be interesting to see, and I'm sure that the TV stations in this state are salivating over how much money they're going to make off of all the ceaseless ads.
And we are done for today. 3 quick things. Number 1, thank you to our supporters at patreon.com/dailydetroit, helping us do independent coverage. Also, reminder that we have a newsletter, dailydetroit.substack.com, where we're sending out headlines and updates. And tomorrow I will be at the soundboard for the Detroit Policy Conference at the Motor City Casino Hotel. Should get some interesting conversations. Tomorrow's episode will be with Fletcher Sharp talking about the Detroit City FC upcoming season, the Lions, all the things. Anyway, with that, thank you so much for listening. Remember that you are somebody, and I'll see you around Detroit. Talk tomorrow.